Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Peart, and welcome to the Salt-Tea Podcast, the podcast where we love the ocean and embrace our inner nerd by discussing fun and exciting topics in marine science. So before we begin this exciting episode, I have just a quick announcement to make. So due to my personal research schedule, and with the permission of my executive producer, I'm going to be switching the day that Salt-Tea Science episodes will be airing. So up until now, I've been posting new episodes on Fridays. But after this episode, we'll now be posting all future episodes on Sundays. Why? Because Sunday rhymes with fun day, and I personally find marine science super fun, and so that's why it's going to be switched to Sunday. And if I've totally offended any of you for changing days on you, I immensely apologize and hope that you will, with time, will forgive me and actually come to enjoy the switch. Okay, so that's it with the announcements. So let's dive into this week's amazing episode. Okay, so this episode is another one of our very own listeners episodes where you email me and I read aloud what you have to say. And so for this listeners episode, I asked for listeners to give me one of their most memorable ocean stories. And so in this episode, of all the emails I received, I've selected two of my absolute favorites to highlight. So our first story comes from a very friendly listener who did, by the way, ask to remain anonymous, and so therefore I will respect your wishes and keep your username and names incognito. But anyway, here is what this fabulous listener had to say. Hi Stephanie, first I want to start off and say I love your channel. You have honestly taught me more and better prepared me about oceanography than my own professor has this entire semester. Aw, thanks. Here is my sea story. This past summer, I went on a study abroad trip to Italy for 1 month. Mind you, this is the very first time I went to Europe, and the experience was truly amazing. Yet what made this trip so much fun for me was being able to go to the sea. I am currently studying ocean engineering, or marine engineering as it is more commonly referred to. And after 2 years of being in school, I had been deprived from the sea, never having time to go to the beach or even gaze off into its endless horizon. A rather ironic situation it might have been, but Italy was where I reconnected with the sea after years of being away. 1 week, a group of 7 of us in my class were allowed to travel across the boot of Italy to a city called Cinque Terre, which I'm so sorry if I mispronounced the name of the city. But anyway, an ancient city comprising of 5 lands, hence the name. Oh, okay, Cinque Terre. Cinque 5 Terre land. Gotcha. I originally wasn't going to go, but I had a huge crush on one of the guys, and me and my friends, the only other female in the group, were running out of options on where to go for our free weekend, so I quickly recommended going with the 5 guys. But I digress. It was there lying on the coast of the Ligurian Sea where I was able to swim for the first time ever in the sea. I had done banana boats and swimming with dolphins thanks to a Make-A-Wish trip, but being in the middle of the sea with nothing but water underneath you was absolutely terrifying. You see, one of my buddies found a boat tour that took us to see each of the 5 cities comprising Cinque Terre, and every now and then the captain would let us swim around, and all around us were schools of fish and gorgeous peach-colored jellyfish. The waters were thankfully calm that day, except for one area, but just being there in the middle of it all reminded me why I loved the sea so much as a child. Like in the song Rainbow Connection, how they preface the sweet song that calls the young sailor. It drummed the same notes in my heartstrings. Now for some funny happenings and things I learned on this trip. 1, I had to drag 4 of my drunk friends back to the hotel after they decided it was a good idea to drink their entire respective wine bottles. I had them do a coin toss to make them stop. I lost, but of course they didn't know that. Also, I learned that dogs will appear in random places when you're wandering near a cemetery, but will immediately disappear after you pet the good boys. Also, friends can and will try to scare you when you're in the middle of the sea by dragging you far into its watery depths and away from your floaties. Skinny dippers love to smile and wave at you despite the look of horror on your face. I also learned that rocks are not comfy on the feet, and the dolphin watchers are actually watching for the pirates who were cursed by Bacchus after they kidnapped him. And lastly, alcohol can be a great eye-opener. Not for myself, oh no, but how others get consumed by it. Well, I learned my lesson, but I don't regret going at all, and as long as God wills, I will return. Thank you so much for your wonderful podcast. Good luck on your future episodes and the future of your podcast. Signed, Anonymous. Well, I just want to say that I really enjoyed reading this story the first time that I read it, and I still enjoy it every time I've read it ever since. So thank you, dear listener, you know who you are, for sending this story in and for sharing your adventure with us. Okay, so now for our second listener story. Okay, so this next story comes from another listener who I'm pretty sure requested to remain anonymous, but it was kind of unclear in the email that they sent. So I'll just keep the listener anonymous for now and later post any names accordingly. Okay, so here's what this listener wrote in. I grew up as the second youngest of 5 kids in Miami, Florida. Around the time I was in 2nd grade, my 2 older siblings, who were teenagers at the time, had joined the Sea Scouts, and my mother participated as one of the leaders. The Sea Scouts often went sailing, and this meant we, the 3 younger siblings, went with them. My 2 sisters and I were called Crew Echo by the Sea Scouts, which is fitting for this story if you ever played the video game Echo the Dolphin, haha. Now, as an adult, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, but as a child, people just thought I was a weird, spoiled kid. I don't quite remember what happened this particular day. I think it was a school day, so this meant I had gone to school and then had to go sailing without any break where I could mentally recharge myself by going home and enjoying free time. Long story short, I actually made myself seasick in protest, something I have never experienced before or since. I worked myself up so much that I hung over the side of the boat feeling nauseous and miserable. Remember now, I'm about 7 at this time and undiagnosed. Then all of a sudden, the others started spotting wild dolphins swimming near our ship. I looked up and without any promptings, these 2 dolphins raised their tails in the air and waved at us. For a brief moment, I was happy enough to feel better. Well, dear listener who wrote in this story, thank you so much for sharing this experience and your adventure. And even though you did have a miserable time starting out, I'm so glad that the end of the trip was way better than the beginning of the trip for you. And I can relate to the dolphins making you feel happy. I personally love dolphins myself, so that's amazing that you got to see them in the wild while you were sailing. Alright, so that's all that I have for this episode. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who have sent in your salty adventure stories, and keep sending them to me. I would love to read all about them. And who knows, your salty story might appear on our next listeners episode. Okay, so before I sign off, I'll just quickly remind you that our next episode will air in 2 weeks on Sunday, February 16th. And in the meantime, if you want to follow along with all of the cool things that I'm doing in the lab and in the field, feel free to follow me on Instagram, username TepsAdventure. Okay, so until next time, don't forget to love yourself, love the ocean, and to always stay salty. Thank you for listening to Salt-Tea Science. But guess what? You don't have to let the fun end here. Go to www.saltysciencepodcast.weebly.com, where I've posted some cool videos, my study notes, and some really neat experiments that you can try at home. And if you want to follow along with my own research, you can follow me on Instagram. User handle TepsAdventure. That's TEPS Adventure. All Salt-Tea Science episodes are available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and YouTube, plus a number of other podcasting apps. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, as this is the best way to spread the word about this podcast. Salt-Tea Science is listener supported, so if you would like to show your support, visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Salty Science, where you can either make a one-time donation of any amount or join the Salt-Tea Science crew for as little as $1 a month. So visit the Salt-Tea Science Patreon and sign up today.